happy to answer questions as we work through them, or if you want to wait till the end, I'm fine with that as well. So I tried to think about what we do and comprise it into one statement. And we do a lot of different things, I'm sure you're aware of. But I thought this kind of summarized, the collaborative approach that we have, and what we strive to do with protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the city. This is just kind of an overview of our scope. So when you think about what we do, and a lot of times people ask, why does it have to be so complicated? And when you think about the breadth of the information and the codes that we're tasked with enforcing, and just the different collaborative pieces and organizations that we work with, there's a lot to know and a lot to kind of wrap your head around. So just kind of paint a picture of that with all the different code sections that we may enforce one or half or all in some, well, not all mostly, but a good chunk of them in some cases. So it's a lot to wrap your head around, but it's also what makes what we do interesting. And so a little bit about our volume. Numbers at the top are our permit numbers dating back to 2017. Below that are the inspection numbers that we have. So relatively consistent as far as permit volume. There was kind of an oddity, a decrease in building permit or building inspection numbers from 2017 to 2021. That was fairly significant, but then also a significant jump from 2021 to 2022. Electrical inspection volume, has been steadily increasing. We have a single inspector now. I'm happy to say that we have a second inspector that will be starting on the 30th. So we're excited to get him on board. For our team, he's going to help Dan, keep up with requests and help us better respond more promptly to inspection requests, and then being able to follow up and do those things that you can't do when you're running around just trying to field requests for inspection all the time. So that's going to help us immensely in that realm. So our code enforcement numbers, we inspect between 11,000 and 12,000 properties, or perform 11,000 or 12,000 inspections every year. Interestingly enough, I thought that 60% of that work is made up of CDBG inspections. The numbers below that are just the contractor cleanup numbers that we had for the prior year. I don't have year to date for this year to see how it compared with last year, but while we didn't get hit quite as hard on snow as we have in the past, there was enough, and we're certainly starting to ramp up with grass and weeds, as I'm sure everyone's seeing. So
yeah, the last 2 years were slow on snow. Like, we only did two and a half storms last year, and then 3 the year before. But when we first when we took it over from 2017, we were doing probably 7, 8 storms. So that's where, and then numbers in 2017 is when they created neighborhood services. So we went from building inspection and zoning to building inspection neighborhood services. That's when we had a couple more employees, so that's why the numbers jumped. We took over grass and weeds, snow and ice, dead trees. And then 2021, we're down 2 inspectors from when we originally were doing 2017, 2018.
Okay.
So now we absorb zoning. We don't have a zoning inspector. We just absorb it in our department starting this year. So that's why the numbers are
So you were down 2, and you'll be up back with 1 more. Is
yes.
what you just
We
stated.
had 2 code, well, they were neighborhood services inspectors, and we had a neighborhood services liaison who dealt strictly with grass and weeds. So in 2018-19, we were doing about 600 grass cuttings at properties, so some could be duplicate. Last year we did 181 properties, and that's from property owner registration, contacting owners, making them or their tenants cut their lawn instead of having our contractor do it. So
okay.
So just kind of talking through an overview of our grass and weeds process. We work primarily off firsthand observation or complaints that we receive. So we'll attempt contact with the owner or the tenant, leave a door hanger, or send a letter. The door hanger gives us a quicker turnaround for abatement with 3 days versus 5 days in the letter. Then we'll send the contractor for abatement. You asked about, how do we streamline this process or make it more efficient? So once we send the letter to the properties that we know are problematic, so if we're consistently going back or we see that it's a problem again, it was a problem last year, once we send that initial letter for the season and the grass gets long, we can just send the contractor to abate it because we've already provided them with notice, so we don't have to continue to send the letter and then wait 5 days. If it gets bad, we just send them out and then bill the property owner. So that's one efficiency piece that's kind of built into that system for the ones that are consistently problematic. And then we're going back, depending upon the weather and how things are, every 7 to 14 days to verify that there's still in compliance, or if we receive a complaint or someone tells us that it's gotten bad again, we'll head back out again.
Mike, I have a question, and actually, for those habitual properties, it seems like oftentimes it's like, I appreciate the efficiency, but it's like chasing the tail constantly. Of these properties that are habitual offenders, do they also receive a citation for subsequent violations of not having the grass cut? So, you know what I mean? You're billing them, but say, this is what I hear often. Okay, well, I can lax on cutting the grass because by the time we get the door hanger, by the time we get the letter, you're just chasing your tail. They'll have cut their lawn already. And then you start the process over. Mm-hmm. So is there a way of streamlining that or looking at that data and saying, okay, we've sent these notices out, like you said, one time. Is that just that one time it's put on the list then? Or does it have to be so many times thereafter?
So if we get a complaint and we send a letter, like normally we'll reach out to the owner. If we hear from her now, we'll send a letter. And then like now we have 7 on our list to go to our contractor tomorrow. They'll cut the lawns. We'll put it on a 7 to 14 day recall just to follow back up with the property. Mm-hmm. But if, let's say you don't cut your grass, we send you a letter and then we come check the 5 days it's cut. So now we get no complaints. We'll follow up with that property again. And we'll do it 1 or 2 times after that. We take it off of our list to like kind of keep going back and checking. Okay. So if you cut your grass, for the next month and then July you don't cut your grass, we get a complaint, we can just send our contractor at that point because the letter says you only get 1 letter.
All right.
So, we prefer the owners or the tenants to cut the lawn instead of sending our contractor on some of those.
Right.
But it's the repeat ones like the vacant buildings. I think the most we cut last year was 7, one property 7 times. Just ones that are vacant, no one's taking care of.
Okay.
So.
Can I ask you a question about that too? What about, I understand we have to get these things done. Do we know the reason why they don't? I mean, do we have people that are elderly? Or do we give them some kind of resource that they can get to get their things done rather than have us come out and do it for them at an expense they probably can't really afford?
All right. People ask us all the time, and we'll give them resources. Most of the time, it's either the property owner was on vacation, which happens a lot, and they didn't have anyone cut their lawn, or it's a rental property, a duplex, and you call the landlord and he's like, oh, I have a new tenant in there, we're supposed to cut the grass. That happens most of the time is you're babysitting rental properties for the tenant to cut the grass. And a lot of times the tenant will have the lawnmower, but they don't have a weed whacker, so in July and August, the weeds around the garage or the parking areas are pretty bad, and that's what we're starting to, those complaints come in later in the year. Right now, it's just the grass is really long. And then later, even our sanitation department, they will do a route and say this alley is really bad. So we'll go address all the properties down in alley. And just from walkthroughs with the mayor and everything, you can start seeing that later in July and August.
Yeah.
And then the citations, when we took over from forestry, we had a citation available for snow removal, but nothing for the lawn. They said that the cost was already built in because it's, if your lot's 60 feet or less, it's $300. It's 61 feet or more, it's $350 is the cost to have the city cut your lawn. So we get complaints all the time, like my Ring doorbell caught your contractor cutting my grass for 15 minutes and you're billing me $300. And it's like, yeah, it's not how long, like they have nice equipment to cut the lawn quick. And, so.
And that doesn't include the weeds, that's grass cutting.
Grass cutting, right.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Okay.
So and the hard part too is like you'll have a property that has garden beds, and our contractor refuses to go in there because every time they do, you cut down this rose bush that I planted for my grandma who's passed or something. So that's where we get the complaints, and those are hard to address. The weeds that are in, flower beds and stuff later on in the season.
That would make sense.
If we hear from property owners, or they reach out to us and say, hey, I need one of the resources, or I need more time, we'll work with them.
That's what I meant, yeah.
Yeah, and but we'll, within reason, provide them with, leniency, or if we can provide them with resources, we certainly will, or refer them to some help.
And if I may go back to the property owner versus the tenant, because I know I called you on one, in fact, and she wasn't equipped with that, nor did she believe that was her responsibility to do. Cutting grass is cutting grass. I'm not a landscaper. So when you have, honestly, when you have a property owner that then kind of skirts that responsibility by saying, oh, no, it's built into my lease, that's really his problem. That's not your problem.
Right.
Our problem.
Right.
And if we're going back to that, I think that that property owner really needs to be held accountable on that. So that you're not saying, oh, well, I feel bad for the tenant, because it really isn't the tenant's ticket either way.
Right. Yeah, but the bill goes to the property owner. If they don't pay it, it goes on the tax bill. But we have heard tenants, say, can I see proof because my landlord's billing me, for this because it was in my lease. I was supposed to do the
Oh, and then
maintenance.
then they come back and bill them because it was in the contract.
Yes. And a lot of times, landlords might have, and some of the landlords are responsible landlords we deal with, and they get a new tenant in there, and they're like, oh, my tenant's supposed to cut that. And we have, I won't say names, but landlords that own 50 properties, and you reach out to them, they're like, I'll contact my tenant. If they don't cut it today, I will cut it personally tomorrow. So I don't know which way you guys prefer to go at, because we could just send a contractor every time we get a complaint and it's on the list, or we reach out to them and try to have them do it. Because if we do have it cut, we still have to get the bill from our contractor. We have to pay them. There's just a lot more work involved when the city cuts it.
And that was my concern, is how much is your caseload following grass cutting? And is there a way we can look at that? Because you're needed in other areas. Some are short, but there's a lot of lawns to maintain. So if you're just chasing, lawnmowers,
Right.
that's not getting your caseload taken care of. So that was one of the reasons I asked for kind of some details on that for the process and how you guys handle that. So thank you.
Who are you find are the worst violators?
What are the worst violators? Well, the vacant properties are worst violators.
Right.
So ones that the county refuses to take back for back taxes, and they're 6-7 years behind in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the worst ones, the vacant properties. And then the next would be like rental properties where the tenant's supposed to cut the grass.
In cases like this, you don't send letters every month then?
No, we send the letter says this is your one letter for the season. So we'll send letters. I think we're like 70 letters already, and you'll just get one letter for your property.
Okay.
So.
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes.
while we're on grass, has there been some confusion about no mow May this year?
A lot.
Obviously, we're not doing it, but I know a lot of other communities are, and it seems it's been in the media quite a bit about other cities that are doing it. Are we getting any pushback on that? I know it wasn't a really widely accepted program when we did do it, and it was backyards only, if I recall, and you had to register.
Right.
And has that been a problem? I'm just wondering, people somehow think they don't have to mow in May. Is that their excuse?
We've been taking a lot of calls, probably between the CSC and in our department, probably 7 to 10 a day for the last 3 weeks. And people think the city should be doing it because they list all these other communities around us doing it.
We should call their elected officials.
Yes. And then I explained to them when it was proposed that it didn't pass, it was you still have to cut your front yard, the city's the walk to curb area between the street and the sidewalk, but it was the backyard.
Yeah.
So then people are like, well, if I'm just going to pick a spot in my backyard. And like, well, if it's fenced in, no one's going to see it. But
Yeah,
if we
that's
get
what my son did that. He's got a part of his backyard
Yeah.
that he's just like.
and if we get a complaint, we'd still have to send a letter, and then they have to make the choice
Can I
on
say it was
it.
my son? Well, somebody I know.
What's his address?
And Marty, I think that's something, I reached out to Mayor Devine on that and asked if maybe we should revisit that next year. But part of this meeting too is where are we at on, rat abatement? And because those were some of the specific reasons why it was not approved to begin with.
I wasn't advocating that we do it.
I know, but yeah.
I just want to know if there was, because it seems like nationwide, I believe it started in Appleton.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe nationwide it's starting to get more legs.
Yes, it is.
See more and more.
It is.
I did get one
Wings.
person call me about it, like you were talking about, and I explained to him that it's one of those things that if one person does it, everyone has to do it. It's not really fair to all the other people in the community. So, and they were fine with that.
So, no mow so far.
No more, no more.
Are we still doing Highway 100 medians? Or is the county taking responsibility now for them?
That I do not know. I would have
I
to ask
believe
them
we're
first.
still doing them. Yeah, Public Works is still
Yeah,
doing
that's
them.
what I thought.
Do we bill a county?
The county gets paid by the state to do it, but do we get that? No.
Maybe we should find them, cite them.
We can talk about that at a different time.
Yeah.
It's too much. Everyone has almost time to-
So I just want to talk a little bit about occupancy permit inspections. So every new business that wants to come into the city and open is required to apply for occupancy. In 2022, we saw a 30% increase in our volume, which is huge for occupancy inspections. And that was driven in part by the incentive program that was offered through MEDC, but also I think part of that incentive program I think increased the numbers. We saw a lot of legitimate businesses come in. We saw some people trying to take advantage of fraudulent businesses by coming in. We see multiple occupancy applications at the same location starts to raise red flags. So we share that information with MEDC. But the overall increase is good. So seeing more businesses making application, and it forces us to kind of think about that process and how we can better help businesses navigate our occupancy process. One of the things we try to do is have a collaborative effort where we coordinate a single occupancy inspection with all the inspectors meeting there at one time, so that the business owner or the tenant doesn't have to meet 5 different entities at 5 different times and get 5 different points of feedback from them. I think OpenGov helps with this too, in that they have a single point of access where they can see notes or inspection notes from everyone that's walked through the property in a single point, so they don't have to worry about 5 different pieces of paper or inspection notes from different people. So trying to condense that and work collaboratively, I think helps. We do struggle, at times with complex occupancies, complex situations. So daycares, nail salons, sometimes small event spaces or change of use get complicated, and that it oftentimes triggers other code requirements that people starting a business may not understand and need help navigating. So I find that if we ask the right questions when we're communicating with them, we can try and help them through the process, by understanding what it is they're trying to achieve. And the more they tell us and the better we understand their business and what they're going to be doing, the better we can set them up for success and navigation of the occupancy process.
Mike, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
How much do you feel that language barrier for occupancy is an issue? Do we have bilingual inspectors, for example?
None of our field inspectors are bilingual.
Okay.
And none of we have bilingual staff in the CSC, but not in code enforcement specifically.
Okay.
I think it becomes challenging at times, both with occupancies and permit inspections. It's tough at times to try and navigate that.
And where are we at on the timeline for occupancy from the point of someone applying, for example, and then getting through the processes? And I know all of it is very, it's particular to the business, as you said. So there's
Sure.
no, okay, you get an occupancy in 3 months. It really depends on their contractors, everything else. But, what is the average?
It'd be hard to give an average. So I know that if someone makes application and we review that, and it's going to talk a little bit about that too, we'll have them set up for inspection, usually within 5 to 10 days of them making application. So planning looks at it, make sure that the use is okay for that zoning district. I started looking at them to kind of do that front end analysis where, is this use appropriate to this business? Is it or this building? Is it consistent with the prior use? If it's a change of use, is it going to trigger any code requirements? So that we can tell them before they get to the point of inspection, oh, hey, you're going to have to get an architect or an engineer to evaluate this. So if we can look at it when they make application before we get out there in the field and share that information or try and say, hey, you may need to do this, I think it only help them navigate that process. I don't know an average to completion. All I can say is that our first inspection is usually within 5 to 10 days.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So try and look at, where do people get hung up and what do they get frustrated with? Communication's obviously a big one, making sure that we're following up with people promptly and being responsive, across the board. And then looking at, the information that we have available, like on our website. If you didn't know anything about our processes, would you be able to navigate it? And, where would you get hung up and where would you get frustrated? I mean, I think those are important things that, we've talked about and, kind of constantly looking at, is the information we have that's available, helpful and navigable to everyone, be it a, design professional or a contractor or, a first-time business owner that's, trying to work through our processes. So, how do we better prepare people for doing that? So some of the things that we're working on, a plan submittal guide. So we're in the process of implementing Bluebeam software, which will help us in electronically marking up drawings. But how can we better prepare our customers to have success, navigating the plan review process? Is the information that we have, helpful to them? I feel that, having any graphics are always beneficial. I think, I started to look at what, where do we struggle the most? And usually it's with, first-time applicants, homeowners trying to, just build a deck, or also with, first-time commercial business owners that are trying to navigate the process. So how can we better prepare information that will help them navigate our processes? I think just kind of constantly asking that question, evaluating what we have available. Kind of on a separate note, we're working on a collaborative nuisance abatement pilot with health to look at our rodent program, and I think Ashley's going to talk a little bit more about this with her part. But we inspect 1 and 2 family homes consistently, throughout the year, and looking at what it is that's causing the rodent problem, and does it make sense for us to send 2 inspectors out when we're going to issue orders for primary drivers of the rodent harborage or the junk and debris or the tall grass anyway, or can we to a certain point inspect those things, issue orders, and work towards abatement? I talked about reviewing occupancy applications, and then just kind of looking at the information that we have. And I feel like I've beat this one, that we're constantly looking at that and trying to look at it through the lens of our customers and improve it as we get feedback, and always trying to make things better for them. So. Well, this is the group at the Frank Lloyd Wright Career Day, so trying to recruit young code enforcement inspectors, get them interested.
How'd that go?
Wow. We had a raffle. Like, you had to answer like 5 questions based on like how long can grass be in West Dallas, and then we raffled off 3 $10 gift cards. So.
Nice.
So we had a lot of people. Normally, they just wanted to go pet the dog at the vet, or talk to the police department or fire department. So it was interesting.
Well, you guys all look very happy there.
It was West House Wednesday too, so we're in our West
Okay,
House
there you
days,
go. It's like, was it a Friday?
so. That was Wednesday.
We all had more traffic than the finance department, that's for sure.
Well, that's really good.
Yes, they were next to us. Yeah. Finance was next to us. So.
I have to say, though, that this year has been a year of positive responses compared to the other years. Past years, I received more positive responses from our customers than any other year that I've had complaints. So that's a plus.
That's good. We'll give Mike that credit. He's new, so
There you
that's
go. Run with it. All right, so are we gonna,
Oh, sorry.
oh, you go ahead.
No, I'm done unless anyone has something a question specific to.
I don't have any. Does anyone else? I thank you very much for the presentation. Are we going to move forward then to Bob and Ashley?
Yep.
All right, thank you all.
Yep.
this slideshow.
Yep, we're good. So I'm going to kick us off with a brief overview of our department and our licensed facilities, and then Bob will take it over for the second half. So to just give you guys an idea of our staffing makeup within the Health Department Environmental District, we have 4 full-time employees, 1 environmental team lead, 1 environmental coordinator who's not in our lovely photo there, and 2 environmentalists that were hired within the last year. We provide our services to the city of West Allis as well as contract with the village of West Milwaukee and the village of Greendale for environmental health services. And then in order to do our follow-up, we break up all of our areas into 4 environmental districts. Those were last set in 2021, but we're currently under the process of redistricting for a few different reasons. As Mike mentioned, we have a lot of new business happening in West Allis as well as some of our other communities. So to just account for that workload as well as some changes in our complaint load and additional staff responsibilities, our lines for our districts will be moving slightly, nothing too dramatic, but you can see here, this is a very zoomed out version of our current district maps with the 4 areas broken down into the 4 colors. The large call out there is the village of Greendale, and then the village of West Milwaukee falls in that green area in the far right there. So those borders will be moving by probably a few blocks within the next month or 2, and we'll be sharing that out with the public as well as our alder persons once those change, just so you know if it affects your district as well. But that will just allow us to have better follow-up and a better, more even distribution between each staff member for our workload. And then the main area that our environmental staff does is dealing with our licensed facilities. So in 2022, we had 566 licensed facilities through DATCAP, or the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. That largely is made up by our food licenses, which would be our grocery stores, restaurants, gas stations, anyone providing food, as well as our hotel, motel, tourist rooming houses, our lodging houses, public swimming pools, and tattoo and body piercing. And then we also do some non-DATCAP facility license for things like weights and measures, which is our gas stations, laundromats, jewelry stores, grocery stores, anything that's providing service based on time or weight. And then our animal sales and services, which would be like grooming and pet shops or fitness centers. And then some basic information about how we oversee our licensing program. So all of our facilities receive an annual inspection, and then depending on that inspection, we may move into enforcement. So doing facility educational follow-up visits if it's just some minor issues that we have, a more formalized fee-based re-inspection if needed, as well as putting facilities on a risk control plan if they are warranting that level of follow-up. And as needed, we do facility closure as well. All of our new businesses, as Mike mentioned, get plan review and pre-inspection, collaborating with the other departments. We work with them to just ensure they have everything that they need in their setup of their business. And then just made a note here because there's been some questions about our inspection frequency, that during the COVID pandemic, understandably public health was very involved in that aspect. And in addition to having some staffing turnovers during that time too, so DATCAP for the entire state lifted that requirement for an annual inspection. We were continuing to inspect facilities, we just were not completing 100% of them on that annual basis. But for the 2022-2023 license year that's wrapping up June 30th, we are on track to meet all of our inspections for the year. I'll hand it over to Bob.
Okay, and I'll take over on the permit side. So in addition to all the various types of licenses, we do issue permits. We focus on resident permits, animal fancier permits, of which we have, I believe, 65 permits in existence at this point. We also have the pleasure of issuing pigeon permits as well as rabbit permits. And then just to touch on some of the other programs that our inspectors are very much involved in, we do have, by statute, responsibility for following up on lead poison cases. So kiddos who are have blood drawn and their blood lead levels are high, then we have a team that respond to that. Very time-intensive process. Those investigations can take up to 40 hours per case. Investigators, they test the surfaces, they issue abatements, as well as go through clearance investigations. A clearance investigation, in addition to the 40 hours per case, can take upwards of 20 hours. So it's a pretty significant time investment. From really start to finish to assess, abate, and then go through the clearance process. That process, though, involves not only just the inspector, but for cases that are elevated, that does engage a public health nurse. So the public health nurse does a lot of case management with the families and the kiddos. And then in addition to lead poisoning, we also have responsibility for the rabies control program. So specifically, when we have a dog, for instance, who bites someone, we'll be notified of that either directly through PD, or on occasion we might get a notification from the emergency department or some form of communication from the emergency department saying, we have a problem dog, and then we have responsibility for ensuring that animal is properly quarantined. So by statute, there are a certain number of days that animal has to be observed before we can release them from quarantine.
Bob, may I ask you a question as far as animal bites? Because there's so many residents now that do have animals. And I've had calls where, an animal has bitten someone. What is the general protocol that you follow with that? If it's a one-time, first-time bite, what do you do?
It doesn't matter. If there is a report of a bite on a human, then it's just a one and done. So we will follow up on that case. It's not like you have to reach a certain threshold.
Okay.
So by statute, again, we have to respond to that, especially in a case where someone is going to go present to the emergency room, and or they have a response from PD, and the PD goes to the effort of filling out a bite report. So yeah, we will essentially then jump into it and be engaged in just to assure that animal has. We'll check for the vaccination record, whether they have rabies vaccine or not, and then we go through the quarantine process. So if they have demonstrated that they've been vaccinated with the rabies vaccine, it's not unusual for us then to allow for a home quarantine, but they'll still have to assure that they are seeing a vet just to monitor for symptoms on that dog. If the dog is not vaccinated, then we will actually have a quarantine at Maddock. And so same situation there, in-house at Maddock. The dog is observed and brought up to date on their vaccinations.
Okay, thank you.
So in addition to the licenses and permits and all the other fun stuff, we'll talk a little bit about the rodent and nuisance investigations. Nuisances is a broad category. So for 2022, we reported 402 total nuisance investigations versus 241 in 2021. So obviously, in large part because of the campaign, we saw significant activity with regard to the number of calls and complaints that came in. 210 of those were identified as rodent complaints, 23 pests, so that could be roaches, it could be bed bugs, 29 dog feces complaints, 12 garbage, 2 that involved yard maintenance, 4 feeding wild animals, 6 animal health and safety, 16 other animal, and so other animal could be a situation where we get a call for a skunk or chickens. We do respond to those calls. So just by way of example of what other animal is. Calls that we also address are hoarding. So we had 3 of those to report for last year. 14 mold calls, 4 indoor air quality complaints, 8 complaints that involved heat and or air conditioning problems at a residence. 17 water and sewage complaints, 4 noise, and then 34 that kind of fall under the general category of other.
I had a question. For the 8 heat and AC and 4 indoor air quality, are those tenants calling in on a rental property?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and these will include West Dallas and West Milwaukee as well. So then just to focus a little bit more so on the rodent program, activities for 2023. So this is what we are in the initial planning phases to do. So essentially replicating much of what we did last year to include the bait station. So we already have our contract with Orkin. So they will be very much involved. ContraPest, rodent birth control, as you guys have heard. Thanks, Mayor Dan, for putting us in touch with that product. We do have ownership of that product. So at this point, we're just talking internally about how we're going to roll that out. We were hoping that Orkin was actually going to help distribute in place and monitor, but they came back to us and said that it's something that they just are not willing to do. We had heard that apparently in some jurisdictions that Orkin was partnering or able to be part of that ContraPest distribution process.
So they won't?
They won't. So we are having to take ownership of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's that $2,000 that was put in the budget for that particular product.
How is that? What is the product and how is it dispensed?
Kevin?
May I speak?
Sure may.
Kevin is our resident inspector, lead inspector.
Sure. So it's placed inside a box, just like the Orkin boxes, the bait stations. It's a liquid in a container that they can only get from the inside of that station. I don't know exactly what the active ingredient is, but it's temporary, just like with the oral contraceptive. So if they stop consuming the liquid, they can reproduce again eventually. We have 20 of those bait stations, and then 4-month supply of refills.
The reason why I asked Kevin is because there's been so much education put out there on either hiring a pest control company or just the basis of knowledge of putting your own bait stations out and picking them up at the hardware store. I would assume the answer to this is going to be absolutely no due to legalities, but could we pilot certain areas of the city where a resident would be willing for us to use that?
So I had to run this by Department of Agriculture pesticide application program. They said only government employees are approved to put that in public right of ways. So no, we could not provide that to residents.
I figured that was the answer. Thank you.
Yes.
I ask a question. Why did Orkin refuse?
Kevin, you have the specifics?
they didn't give an exact reason why, but basically it wasn't on their local list of approved pesticides that their team here in the area will use. So I think in other areas they have gone through those checks and balances to have it become approved. That's what I believe, but I didn't get a direct answer from them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of keep in mind that, when we started the program, we were really, and still continue to ideally be focused on kind of the best practices, industry best practices. So ContraPest, though it's promising, I don't think has really come out as being identified as an industry best practice yet. So to say Orkin, didn't take it on for that reason, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little nervous about jumping in at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have talked about piloting that as well in neighborhoods where we aren't essentially where we are confined to CDBG funds with the larger portion of the funding we have for the program. But yeah, looking at it as a pilot and then doing what we can to collect all the data that we need to, so then we can demonstrate its effectiveness as well.
Thank you.
So again, just to kind of finish with the rodent program, really the only thing that we are planning to roll out that's new for this year is landlord training. So we're pulling those details together. We focus on rodent orders and citations for 2022. 13 orders were issued, 12 of those were resolved. And then so far already in spring, 11 orders have been issued, with all 11 having been resolved so far. So this is our wrap-up slide here, but in reference to Mike's heads up with regard to our collaborative project here. We're looking at this as a project. We just really, just based on our discussion and the data, really understand and know that really the bulk of the calls that we're getting for rat complaints, they're of course resident based, and well over 50% of the time they're going to be property maintenance issues. So what we talked with Mike about recently was, let's look at things maybe a little differently, and rather than those types of calls coming in directly to the health department and us going out initially and making the time investment to go address an issue that invariably is going to get referred over to code enforcement anyway, Mike and his crew are agreeable to essentially be the point for those types of scenarios moving forward. So we'll look at it as a pilot again. Just look at any feedback that we get with regard to that new approach. Health will still be taking on the calls that have to do with multifamily residences, commercial businesses, and such, but for resident properties that are have particular rat complaints, we're going to essentially defer to those experts now at this point to kind of take that on. So we see this as a hopefully a quality improvement project, but certainly recognizing that we're just going to have to pay attention to the process as we kind of roll with it and modify it as we need to.
Thank you.
I have one question. Bob, for when you guys are going to do the collaboration, I know you have certain folks that are trained to search out where the rats are living, what's causing it. So is that environmental person going to join the bins person to say, here's where they're living, let's get some good education, here's your problem, but it's also a cause due to this overgrown grass and this, since those folks are trained to know where the rats are coming from, where they're living, where those exact problem areas are?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so we're not completely taking ourselves out of that process, but if and when code enforcement goes out and they see that there are borough issues, That will become a referral to the health department. They see, as noted here, active movement of rats and rodents, then we will get involved more explicitly. But really, just in large part because of the calls that we're getting are going to be more tall grass, weeds related. Yeah, we're going to try this approach if you guys are cool with that, and just see if we can maybe kind of nip this in the bud a little bit and be a little bit more efficient in terms of our approach.
Well, and kind of circle back to what Alderwoman Brinke had stated about getting positive calls versus the complaints. Even social media, I've noticed it's not as much rat talk. I don't know if you've all felt the same way. And I think that really is primarily because of education. And I love when somebody does say something or complain, you'll get a plethora of residents that come in and say, hey, A, B, C, D. And so I know the message is getting across. So I applaud you guys for that work. And I think we have more work to do, obviously, but still, I think we're going in a really good direction.
That's the end of our presentation.
Well, I thank you all for attending. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, we have one more. I'm sorry.
I went to
I'm so sorry.
the council chamber, so I apologize for that.
That's okay.
I was wondering why I was sitting by myself.
Singing all by myself.
I think we found out why. Do you have access to the P drive?
Is that it?
These are like blue. I can try, but I think this is for Bluetooth.
Uh-oh. Common Council PowerPoint. Yep.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Armando Suarez Del Real. I am the Deputy Chief for the City of, well, obviously our fire department. I oversee bureaus of fire prevention and, have the keyboard, please. Fire prevention and mobile integrated health care. So I'm going to probably echo a lot of the same things that the previous two presenters showed, obviously with a more specific view on fire code enforcement. What the fire department inspects. So we roughly inspect about 4,500, a little bit more periodics annually. We inspect all those properties every year. And then, of course, we do the occupancies and the specialty permits like sprinkler systems, alarm systems, hood systems, stuff like that. Every business gets inspected. The personal premises upon the request. A request is a nice way to say complaint. So if we get a complaint, then we'll go and see if there's any issues that can be resolved. Generally speaking, it's usually just neighbor versus neighbor, but at the same time, we don't have much jurisdiction with one or two family residences. It's usually based on the occupancy type. The more high risk, if you will, schools, nursing facilities, skilled nursing facilities, stuff like that, they get inspected twice a year. We do not need to have the owners present. It's a nicety. It's nice to have them there. We don't force our way in also. If the business owner says that they don't want an inspection at that time, we can schedule an appointment. We normally don't, though, given the volume of inspections that we have. That'd be an overwhelming task. We have one full-time fire inspector that is on our tower ladder, our truck. They go out every day along with our lieutenant of inspections, and then myself if it gets really bad. So help everyone, right? We follow the IBC, NFPA, Department of Safety and Professionals, the DSPS, and municipal codes. We here in the city of West Allis don't have more restrictive regulations in the state of Wisconsin. We have the same restrictive codes as the state of Wisconsin. In the past, we had a little bit more restrictive codes in the municipal code, but we've since gotten away from them. So everything that we enforce is what the state would have us enforce. The main things that we are going to be looking for and the main volume of violations that we have would be fire extinguishers. This is for every occupancy, every business type that we have there. It has to be of a specific size, at minimum 5 pounds. It has to be certified every year. That extinguisher is out of service. They'd get a violation for that one. It has to be inspected within the last year. It has to be a specific height, unobstructed, and obviously maintained. Smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. This is one thing where we do respond to a lot of complaints from tenants, especially in 3 or more residents, where the landlords are ultimately responsible for smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. If they do not have them, we will issue them a 7-day warning that they have to have them put in place, or we will go install them for them at a rate of $200 an hour plus the cost of the detectors. With our alarm systems, we have to, the occupants need to show that the pull station has been tested on a monthly basis. When we're coming through, we need to be able to see the records of their yearly maintenance being done, and it has to be done by a certified contractor, not somebody that just knows alarm systems very well. The alarm panel needs to be locked, and the key has to be readily accessible. All businesses, have to have what's called a Knox box, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the slides. And that is just a dedicated key, a dedicated lock box for the fire department and only the fire department to access, so that we can unlock any of the doors and the panels that are in a business. The use of extension cords. We recently have had an uptick in the overuse of extension cords. Dedicated, like display cases, they have to have their own outlet. They can't, have piggyback extension cords everywhere. This is one of our main violations that we have. Blocked exits and exit lights. That is at the whim of the duration of the light itself. You do have exit lights that go out very often, and we have a little bit more leniency with something like that. It's a violation, but it's something that we do give a little bit more time for them to fix. The blocked exits is a no-go. We have to make sure that all of our exits remain unimpeded. The use of emergency lighting and fire doors, very important to the travel of fire. If, God forbid, there is a fire in one of our businesses or apartment complexes, that is vitally important for keeping the occupants as safe as they can be if they were to get trapped in a building. Utilities, dryers, and water heaters. There are codes for electrical panels and water heaters that need 36 and 24 inches, respectively, clearance in all directions. That's something that we do monitor very closely, because the majority of our preventable fires do involve electrical origin, or at least the cause is deemed electrical in origin. And then, of course, in winter, which is 9 months out of the year, we have to worry about making sure that the snow is not blocking any exits and or any of the causeways. The sprinkler systems, they have to be inspected annually, very similar to the alarm systems. It is the building owner's responsibility. It is not the responsibility of the tenants. Sometimes there are contracts when you have some of these larger buildings where they have larger, box stores, if you will, where there's multiple large stores in there, and they could dictate that the occupant, is in charge of one specific sprinkler system. But ultimately, if it were to come down to a citation, it would be the building owner that would be responsible for it. Then, of course, per NFPA and IBC, no storage within 18 inches of the heads. That's obviously so that the sprinklers will do their job. And then clear access to the fire department connections. The heads cannot be painted, because that's going to reduce the functionality of the fusible links that they have in there. That's a picture of one of the Knox boxes that we have. That one is inset into a wall. Majority of them are sticking out from the wall somewhere near the front of near the front entrance, depending on the architectural type or whatever type of building material they have. The fire department is the only department that has a key to that, and then within there they have, as you can see, there are some keys. Either it's a fob or a actual physical key that opens the alarm panels, the electrical boxes, and any of the doors. They have a master key in there. One of the things that we've started to do recently is ask that businesses that have what's called a fire department connection cap, what is on the right there, is a specific key that only we have to open that. Of course, it would never happen here in West Dallas, but in other communities, people would open them and mess with them. That's a huge problem if you were to have a building on fire and you have an obstructed fire department connection. We use these to nurse the the sprinkler system. So there's a finite amount of water that's available for that sprinkler system, and we come and make sure it's pumped at the appropriate pressure to keep the fire suppression abilities down of that sprinkler system. And if these are damaged or tampered with, then we can't access it, which is a big issue. All right, so for the compliance, once a business is found to be in violation of one of our ordinances or one of the fire codes, life safety issues need to be immediately fixed. That has to be something that is going to be fixed immediately, i.e. like in a blocked exit. Our inspectors will not leave until that exit is completely unblocked. If it's not unblocked, then we'll go through the necessary citation process with the police department. We don't have that problem. Business owners are very, very compliant. They're willing to fix issues like that. Smoke alarms, 0 to 10 days. 10 days is the buffer that we put in there. We give them a 7-day notice. That's a very important thing for life safety. Smoke alarms have been found to have a great impact on survivability, so that's something we take very seriously. Like I said, we install the smoke alarms and then we bill the owner. Other circumstances would be at the inspector's discretion. So it depends on, it's situational, right? So if majority of our codes have a 30-day process, over the last year we decided to change that a little bit. We'll give our individual inspectors, the floor inspectors, we'll give them the ability to try to mitigate those violations within 30 days. What we're talking about is fire extinguishers that haven't been maintained in a year, or an alarm system, something like that. Things happen, times are tough sometimes, so we're not going to sit there and expect them to get it done within 7 days, but it's reasonable for them to be able to get it done within a month. After 30 days, unfortunately, it gets in my desk, and then we start going through a little more aggressive process in which if they don't have it mitigated within 90 days, a citation is issued, and they get bills from the day of the violation. And I've been in my position now going on this is my second year. We've had to flirt with threatening with the citation a couple of times, but we haven't had to actually bring that to fruition anytime or since I've been in charge. So that's a good thing. We're not trying to shut places down. We're trying to work with them to get those violations mitigated. Any questions that I can answer?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead.
when you had the building owners 7 days, and if they don't do it, you charge $200 to go in there and do it. How many of those do you get a year? Or do they pretty much obey the 7-day warning?
They obey it.
So you haven't had
I haven't had one since I've done it. There hasn't been one since before 21. I can look previous to that, but we can, speak softly but carry a big stick, right? We don't want to cite anybody or fine anybody unduly. The one thing that we have begun to do since 2021 is false alarm fees. Now, false alarm fees is any time that a business would have a commercial fire alarm system or sprinkler system, and the alarms would go off for a non life-threatening situation. So, for example, you have a bad smoke head and it is continually alarming, and then they're not getting it fixed. Well, that's a problem, because when those alarms come out, we send the cavalry, right? We send 2 heavy pieces. We send a battalion chief. That's a big deal. That's a lot of money to get those big, hogs rolling around. Those fire trucks get 2 miles to a gallon. So, and plus we're putting everybody in an increased danger, right? We're going light sirens across the city or wherever we're going. It's putting the public at an undue risk, putting ourselves at undue risk for something that they're just not being compliant with properly maintaining their systems. So we give everybody 3 strikes, if you will, right? After the first false alarm, you get a letter from the Fire Prevention Bureau saying, "Hey, we were at your business. It was for a false alarm. There was no cause for alarm. If this happens, 2 more times within the calendar year, you'll receive now it is a $400 bill." Last year, I think and our goal obviously is not to bill too many people. We had $12,400 last year alone in false alarm fees, and it was at the beginning of the year when we first started finding them, and then they caught on fairly quickly, and then it tapered off at the end of the year. We've only issued 2 this year in the first 5 months, so we see it as a positive.
Well, thank you, and I thank everyone for coming tonight. The presentations were very informative. We have literally 30 seconds to get to our Common Council meeting. So, motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
machine up.